join the team. Normally we have 2 constitutional experts and one drafts person. So each country normally is represented by 3 officials. As I've said, 2 constitutional experts and one drafts person. So I expect the government of Federal Republic of Somalia would appoint its members to join the team. And probably we expect in the future for the government of Somalia to invite the team also to come here to collect public opinion and how do we want that confederation to be. Now, having that said, let me come back to my topic, that is customs union. Article 75 of the treaty establishes a customs union. And this, according to this provision, Article 75, in 2004, a protocol on the customs union was adopted. And actually, after 1 year, in 2005, the customs union was established formally. The protocol and the treaty, they say there should be rules of origin. The rules of origin. Now, these rules of origin members, they relate to business. The first, simply, these rules are used to determine the originality of goods that are sold in the EAC. Okay, so in order for goods to be to get a preferential treatment, that is supposed not to pay export duties that are called, you have to prove, first of all, that these goods were produced within East Africa. So, for instance, if it is a businessman from Somalia is going to Kenya selling some goods, he has to prove that these goods were produced in Somalia in order to be exempted from export or import duties. So the rules are there to determine the originality for the purpose of determining where they have been produced. The rationale for these rules, the rationales are 2. The first, they prevent abuse from businessmen, okay, or business people, because those who are doing business, they are likely, for instance, I'm giving an example, selling Chinese goods and presenting them as from, for instance, United Republic of Tanzania. I've got Chinese goods, then I bring them to Somalia, disguising them. These are produced in Tanzania so that I don't pay import duties. So the rules prevent abuse of that advantage under the customs union. The second reason or rationale is to encourage production internally. If we sell that what we produce, that means that we are going to increase the production within the region. And that means economic prosperity within the region. So the rules encourage people to produce internally so that they can get benefit under the customs union. The rules themselves, members, they are complex. They are complex in nature because of the business or the complexities that exist. They are also based on the interconnectedness of the world. The world is globalized, as we say. So sometimes the goods that are produced here in Somalia, for instance, some materials have been obtained elsewhere, in China, in Saudi Arabia, or in Ethiopia. Okay? So that's the complexity of this rule. Because of interconnectedness and because of business that we do, raw materials could be fetched from elsewhere. The rules are saying, in order to prove that actually those goods originate from your territory, you have to prove first that the majority, the good percentage of the materials that were used come from that country. But also, if the materials that were used come from elsewhere, they are likely to be rejected. You might be imposed or obliged to pay import taxes. So the rules talks about the criteria that is used for the purpose of determining whether the goods were produced within the territory or the East Africa region, or they were produced elsewhere. One rule which is provided in Rule 5 is saying goods wholly produced in a partner state. So they provide how do we determine that the goods were being produced in a particular partner state. But also, there are other rules. The processes. They are saying, for instance, if, for instance, the goods were produced in China, I'm giving an example, but packaging is done here, then it cannot get advantage because those would be Chinese goods. Branding, maybe somebody could do branding and some packaging and something of the sort. So branding or packaging normally does not change the situation that those goods have been produced outside the East Africa region. But also there are other rules. They want issuance of a certificate. So each partner state is required to designate an authority that would issue those certificates to signify whether those rules were originally produced in that particular state. So, for instance, in Tanzania, I think I've been told this Tanzania Chamber of Commerce is the one which issues those certificates. It has been designated by the government of the United Republic of Tanzania to issue those certificates. So, in short, what I might wish you to say, the rules of origin which are made under the protocol, they are meant to determine whether goods are produced within the region or they have been produced elsewhere. That's in short. Of course, there are challenges. There are challenges to this system. One is that delay, because now every time the authorities will have to inspect the goods, and the business people normally, they care about the time, okay? So goods will have to be inspected to find out whether they've been produced internally. But also, this process has led to complaints about aggravation of costs, because if you are looking for the certificate, you have to wait somewhere for your goods to be inspected. So all this, there are people who have complained that it has led to increase of costs instead of reducing the cost for business. But also, business people have also complained about this process of checking whether the goods were produced internally, because the business people are interested in making a profit. They're interested in the cost. They're interested in traveling quickly. So in most cases, they would be stopped for the purpose of inspecting the goods, whether they have been produced internally. And you would understand. You would understand because in order to promote internal trade within the EAC, these rules are necessary despite these problems. Now, what are the recommendations, members? The first recommendation, especially for the people of Somalia who have joined this union, is that there is a need to conduct public awareness programs for all stakeholders. Those who they deal with, actually including business people, the authorities that deal with these things, law enforcement officials, and all that involved in this sector need to be aware about the rules of origin. Because Sometimes they may complain that they are being delayed, they are being harassed because they don't understand the gist or the presence of these rules. But also I would like to advise the people of Somalia or the government of Somalia to designate an authority, an institution that would issue certificates of origin as the rules require. So I think that's very important. You should have one institution which business people must know they are going there to get a certificate. And that would actually make things simple for them. Number 3, also another recommendation that we need cooperation. The governments in the partner states need to cooperate. When there are problems or complaints about delays, about maybe mistreatment or something else, they need to sort out. So the governments need to work closely in order to resolve the problem that appear in the course of process. Another recommendation, the 4th one, the governments, all governments in East Africa need to encourage local production for the purpose of developing, for Somalia, I would say for the purpose of developing Somalia, but also the region in general. So there is a need to encourage local production, and because I said, with the local production, we are assured of local prosperity. And if our business people always sell foreign goods, then we are developing those societies and they will remain poor. The last one is, I would also advise the government to encourage producers to add value to their products. And that I think it would be very important. So for instance, here in Somalia, you keep goats, I think. I have been somewhere where I've seen a lot of goats. So if you are selling your goats to Kenya, probably they should be processed, packed, so that the value would increase instead of selling goats themselves. So in short, I would say again, the rules of origin are very important for the reasons that I have given. They encourage production internally, but also they prevent business people who might wish to abuse them trying to sell foreign goods and they get advantage under the customs union. Having said so, I would like to thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edie. That was a lovely presentation. I hope the business people here have learned a lot, and hopefully they will use that information to enhance their exports and imports across the East African bloc. Now I would like to welcome our next keynote speaker, Emmanuel Tabaro from Leo Africa Institute. Emmanuel, big round of applause for him, please. Aye, the energy is low. I want 3 claps for Emmanuel. Our 3 claps. 1, 2, 3, 3. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right. I'm very happy to be here in Somalia. I arrived only 2 hours ago, despite my journey starting 3 days ago. So I left my house on Sunday, and thank God I'm here on Tuesday. Nonetheless, I'm excited. So when the organizers of this conference reached out to me, asking me to present on the topic, precisely what I was about to talk about. So as I was saying, ladies and gentlemen, that when the organizers of this conference reached out to me and asked me to present on the topic and gave me clear instructions that I should use a PowerPoint, I was a bit disappointed because I don't like PowerPoints. They tend to be very prescriptive and they tend to bore the audience. So I'll just use the PowerPoint as a reference. So I was asked to talk about the legalities of the EAC with a closer look at Somalia. So I will not go into the definitions because I think the previous speakers today and yesterday went through all this, and many of you, by virtue of your attendance here, you have an idea as to what it takes to be an EAC member state. So who is an EAC member state? That is covered in Article 3 of the EAC Treaty. I will not go into that. But I think the most important thing is, why should Somalia join the EAC, or why is Somalia's entrance into the East African community significant? I think that's what I want to focus the basis of my presentation today. So, I know Somalia is a country of pastoralists. I happen to be one. And we love telling stories. And I think stories convey deeper meaning and help people appreciate complex issues better than PowerPoints would. So, as I said, I will not go through Article 3. It outlines who a member state is. But I want to talk about the history of Somalia and East Africa. As you may well know, I don't know if the organizers announced, I come from Uganda, but the last 2 days I have been in transit, whether it's in Nairobi or here. Whenever I've been at a check-in desk and I mention that I'm going to Somalia, someone speaks to me in Somali. So if you're looking for reason number one why Somalia should join the East African community, I've given you just one. But on a more serious note, I was first introduced to Somalia by a Somali writer called Nuruddin Farah. Now, I know Farah hasn't lived in this country for a long time, but through his novels, he depicts the history of Somalia, the culture, the people, and I think in reading his works, I got to understand or to have a vivid description of what makes Somalia tick and what makes the Somali diaspora one of the most vibrant, not only in our region, but also, I think I can comfortably say, in the world. Now, Nuruddin Farah, as you might well know, lived a part of his life in Uganda. He was teaching at our main university, Makerere, in the 90s. So writing in 2010, following the unfortunate Kampala bombings that killed over 70 Ugandans, Farah recounted an earlier meeting with President Yoweri Museveni in the 1990s. And to quote him, he says he approached a friend of his who was then a minister in the government with a suggestion to, quote unquote, take my peace proposal for Somalia to President Museveni, who at that time was chairperson of the Organization of African Unity, the precursor to the AU. And Farah says that Somalia, I was pleased, was top of the OAU chairman Museveni's agenda. This is around 1990. Of course, the engagement did not go so well because following a series of meetings between members of the Somali diaspora in Uganda and outside Uganda, their efforts did not succeed. And I think Nuruddin made the mistake of airing his frustration publicly to a BBC correspondent that President Museveni had been a letdown. And this resulted into his expulsion from Makerere, and he left Uganda at that time. Of course, writing in 2010, Farah seems to have warmed up to President Museveni because a lot had changed, and he described the Ugandan leader then as being steadfast in his unflinching support to Somalia. Why do I tell that story? Because whenever we talk about Somalia, whether it's its entrance to the East African community or the recent challenges that the country has had, oftentimes we ignore the agency of Somalis themselves, both in the country and outside the country. And I think at every critical juncture, Somalis have been very critical in shaping the direction of their country's interaction with the region. The second story I want to tell is one that is close to my heart, and it involves someone who is in this room. That is my friend and a fellow of the Leo Africa Institute in Uganda, where I happen to be deputy director, and that is a gentleman called Mohammed Okash. Mohammed is somewhere in the audience. He's one of the organizers of this conference. So, in 2017, my organization launched a regional fellowship program called the Young and Emerging Leaders Project, and our aim was to identify promising young, as the name suggests, young and emerging leaders in our region. And we received applications from a number of countries, but our focus, and I think it was even clear in the application, is that this program is for East Africans. So we're looking at Kenyans, Ugandans, Tanzanians, Rwandans, and Burundians at that time. Around that time, Okash was studying at a university in Kampala. He was doing his master's, and he applied for the program. So the program would request you to identify where you come from or which country you're a citizen. So Okash said he was from Somalia, and we rejected his application. This was in 2018. The next year, we put out the second call, and Okash still applied. And now we could not just reject his application. We needed to sit and confer. So when we sat to review his application, and Okash, I've never told you this story. So when we sat to review the application, we had to ask ourselves, under what criteria would we reject this application? True, this was an applicant from Somalia, which was not a member of the EAC at the time, but everything on his CV made him the ideal candidate for the program. He had been the coordinator of an international class of over 52 graduate students at Kampala International University. He had been a Minister of International Affairs and Foreign Relations of Kampala International University Students' Union, among so many other achievements that put him far beyond his peers. Confronted with this dilemma, ladies and gentlemen, we were forced to amend the rules and admit Okash in the 2019 Young and Emerging Leaders Project class, where 10 months later, he emerged as the class valedictorian. So when a few months ago, Somalia was admitted into the EAC, I wanted to call up someone at Arusha. My friend is seated in the audience there. He sits at the secretariat. I wanted to call someone up at Arusha and tell them that actually my organization, the Leo Africa Institute, had adopted Somalia years before the East African community had done. And I think this is testament to what role civil society can play in deepening integration. And it affirms further the truth or the statement that integration ultimately is about people. It's not about the laws, the rules, and that's why I skipped the treaty or the approach that the presenters had requested me to make. So, still on Okash, I'm glad to report that following his time in the fellowship, of course, after we had amended the rules, we couldn't go back. So, Somali applicants who applied for the classes that followed would have to be adopted based on that precedent. But I must report that Okash has been instrumental in expanding our institute work and our network here in Somalia, where following his admission, 2009 would be 5 years ago, we now have, and I'm happy to report, 4 fellows of the Leo Africa Institute from Somalia, working in various sectors in this country. Some of them are working with government, others in the private sector, and some of them in your institutions of higher learning. I find these to be brilliant, energetic young people who are committed to rebuilding their country, Somalia, and to sharing this experience with their regional peers through programs like ours. Today, thanks to the addition of Somalia, the East African Community Center of Gravity, I don't know if you can look at that map. Those of you who did elementary physics in high school, you remember a formula for determining the center of gravity of an irregular object? Put it on a string. So if you held our East African community on the string, its center of gravity is moving further eastwards and northwards to somewhere, I believe, that is between eastern Uganda or western Kenya. And what initially started out as an East and Central African affair, as you can see with the original member states, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and then Rwanda and Burundi, we seem to be shifting towards Central Africa. But I think with the addition of Somalia, what initially started as an East Central African affair is slowly gravitating into what you would consider a greater East and Horn of Africa community of 9 member states. I know countries like Ethiopia have expressed interest in joining the community. This will further strengthen the move eastwards and northwards into the Horn of Africa. As I come to a close, why do I bring up these 2 stories? They underscore the resilience and contributions of Somalia's people towards shaping the direction of their country over the last 3 or so decades ago. Many observers who look at Somalia today find Somalia's problems or define Somalia's problems as intractable and suggest that solutions to these can only possibly come from outside. And eager to proffer these quick solutions and sometimes lacking proper context of the country's problems, they resort to argument by analogy. I don't know if members in the audience are familiar with argument by analogy. Argument by analogy is where you look at 2 similar situations that are alike, and then you make a conclusion that certainly one should lead to the other. And I'm sure you've heard of comments like Somalia is another Afghanistan in the waiting, and that upon the exit of foreign forces, it's unlikely the center in Somalia will hold. I disagree with such assessments because I think rather than focus on what the world and the region can offer Somalia to overcome her challenges, we ought to discuss what Somalia can give in terms of lessons for the region. And these lessons can be drawn from its rich history and recent experience as a post-conflict society. And here again, I'll revert to some examples from history. Somalia, over 60 years ago, showed us and the whole continent that a president in Africa can be defeated in a free and fair election and hand over power peacefully. This following the defeat of President Aden Ade in 1967. And this election defeat, or I don't know how you look at it, whether it was election defeat on the side of President Ade or election win on the side of the gentleman who replaced him, made significant history for Africa because it was the first time that power was transitioning democratically from one elected leader to another, for the first time in Africa outside of Liberia. I'm sure many people confronted with Somalia's issues today do not remember this history. The other example I want to highlight is Somalia's stance with the rest of Africa. Somalia stood shoulder to shoulder with progressive Africans fighting foreign domination or dictatorships by fellow Africans, as was the case in Uganda under President Idi Amin, where Somalia's president then, President Siad Barre, offered support to Ugandan exiles like President Yoweri Museveni. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, I don't know if you know this, but when he was fighting Idi Amin, President Yoweri Museveni at the time was carrying a Somali passport that was given to him by this country. And the picture you can see there is President Siad Barre mediating between the Foreign Minister of Tanzania and the Foreign Minister of Uganda, something that I'll talk about a bit later. Somalia not only provided support to Ugandan exiles, the country also supported other struggles on the continent, prominent amongst which was a support to the African National Congress while they fought white minority rule in South Africa. Example number 3 is how Somalia saved the East African community. I know, must be wondering, it wasn't a member, how did it save the East African community? In 1972, with Tanzania and Uganda, who are members of the original East African community, almost pushed to war amongst each other, President Siad Barre mediated between the two countries, and following Somalia's intervention through the Mogadishu Accord of 1972 that was signed between Tanzania and Uganda, the event that is highlighted in the picture there. This is a New York Times article from 1972 talking about the historic signing in Mogadishu of the Mogadishu Accord between Uganda and Tanzania that forestalled outright war that would not only have happened between Tanzania and Uganda, but also would have dragged on other regional member states because countries had started aligning with either Tanzania or Uganda. So in that sense, Somalia served the East African community. Although the community eventually broke apart in 1977, and you can see what happened because a year later, after the community broke apart, Tanzania and Uganda went to war. So Somalia gave us 5 more years of the East African community. With the community no longer in existence and whatever semblance of cooperation was left between Tanzania and Uganda broken down, the two went to war in 1978, which resulted in the eventual overthrow of President Idi Amin. So Somalia's role towards the East African community has been significant, and I hope that some of these examples, especially to the young Somalis in the audience today, give you the hope that this is familiar territory for you and that you're not strangers in this union and in this community. As I mentioned earlier, my journey here took 3 days. So to occupy myself, I bought a copy of the East African newspaper that came out over the weekend, and it had an interesting story. Somewhere, I think must have been page 6. The story said, Somalia moves closer to enjoying perks of joining EAC. And it detailed a recent meeting in Nairobi where Somalia sent a 25-man delegation to discuss the modalities of being fully integrated into the EAC. I think this is a significant step worth congratulating this country upon. And I think Somalia's entry into the East African community opens up several unlimited opportunities for the region to harness, especially the experience of your large diaspora that is spread across the world and the unique skills that they bring into the community. Already the Somali diaspora in Uganda and Kenya plays a significant role in business, and in the case of Uganda, it's perhaps the largest African indigenous capitalist class in Uganda. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say this, that Somalia, 52 years ago, saved the old East African community from collapse. Its entry into the same community in 2024 might be the salvation that our vibrant but troubled EAC needs. Asante sana, Mungu ibariki Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki.
Asante sana, Emmanuel Tabaro, for that wonderful and insightful brief about Somalia's important role in the East African community. Now we are going to head to the first panel of the day. I would like to welcome the panelists, but first they are going to speak about leveraging East Africa community for stronger environmental policies. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for our moderator, Mohamed Okash. Mohamed Okash. He is the Director of Institute of Climate Change and Environment, a department of the CIMAD University. I would also like to welcome another person from ICE, or the Institute of Climate Change, Dr. Ulrike. Dr. Ulrike, welcome. A big round of applause. On this panel, we are also joined by the Director General of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Somalia, Ahmed Yusuf. Round of applause for him. And finally, the lecturer for the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences at the Somali National University, Abdulatif Hussein Omar. Abdulatif Hussein Omar, welcome.
Oh, okay. Thank you, guys. Well, let's take it anyway. Where's Hassan Abu? Can I get the mic, please? Do we have Abbas Qasim from Lasford? Abbas, please come forward. And lastly, but not least, Mr. Hassan Abdul Saq from UNDP Somalia. A very good morning to you all again. My name is Mohamed Okash. I'm the founding director of the Institute of Climate and Environment at CIMAD University. I'm so pleased to host this incredible panel of experts. Together we will discuss various issues of climate and environment in the East Africa. Yesterday and today we have been talking about economic integration, building a shared prosperity, inclusive socio-economic transformation, but we realize that we cannot achieve all those aspirations without putting the question of environmental issues. We cannot talk about economic development alone. We cannot talk about social development alone without the environmental issues. Drought, floods, extreme weather events have become a normal in East Africa. Over 100 million people have been impacted by environmental and climate disasters for the last several years in the region. These are not just numbers in the reports, maybe some of the reports at the ICE office, but these are actual figures that has been impacted by people's lives. Environmental and climate issues are threat multiplier, which means they have impact on every aspect of our lives. Therefore, and that's why we have given a very much interest in this conference. As you can see, this is the largest panel of experts we have hosted here at EACON. And that shows how much we have put an interest and significance to this issue. I want to introduce the panel. Before that, let me share a few housekeeping announcements. This session has been live streamed virtually at the moment. And we want to have a dialogue rather than a monologue. So if you have any questions or suggestions or comments during the conversation, please feel free to tweet by using the hashtag of EACON 2024, day 2, #EACON 2024. To begin with introductions, from my left side, I have a very important person, Dr. Ulrich. She goes by Dr. Ulu. She's a good friend of CIMAD University and ICE Institute. She currently serves as a senior fellow at our institute. Dr. Ulu is a lawyer by profession, an environmental specialist, specializing in disaster control and environmental law. Her scientific goals revolve around addressing challenges posed by climate change, environmental degradation, and social transformation in Somalia and Africa. With a focus on the effective civil protection, she formulates requirements, develops a viable approach, and evaluates implementation. In her research, projects include examining the legal and organizational instruments for civil protection in Somalia. Dr. Ulu is a fellow of our university. Please welcome Somalia and welcome at EACON. It's worth mentioning this is her first trip out of Europe. So welcome Somalia, and we are very pleased you chose to be in Somalia for your first trip to Africa. We also have next to Dr. Ulu, Hassan Abdusak Ahmed, who serves as a program specialist in the resilience and climate change portfolio at UNDP Somalia. With extensive knowledge and experience in the field of nature, climate, energy, Hassan is dedicated to address climate issues in Somalia and the region. He holds advanced academic qualifications in environment and economics. Please, Hassan, welcome to EACON. Next to Ahmed, we have Mr. Ahmed Yusuf, who is the Director General of Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Federal Republic of Somalia. Ahmed, in his role, he serves as he achieved significant milestones in developing national policies, legislations, regulations, both local and multilateral instruments. Ahmed holds double masters in public administration, environment, peace, and development. Please, Ahmed, welcome to the panel. Ahmed is a good friend of ours, and we are pleased to have you back here. We have Brother Abdulatif Hussein Omar, who is environmental advocate. He's the founder of Action for Environment, a youth-led environmental advocacy institution based in Mogadishu. He's currently a senior lecturer at Somali National University. Please, Abdi, welcome. Lastly, but not least, we have Abbas Qasim. Abbas is a senior director and climate practice lead at Lasford Consulting Group, which is a regional consulting firm based in Mogadishu and Nairobi, with expertise in conflict prevention, environmental peace building, climate security, and climate change, climate adaptation in a fragile context, mostly like Somalia. Mr. Qasim has served an esteemed number of organizations, including the NDI, the National Democratic Institute, the Heritage Institute, and the World Bank Group, as well as Berghoff Foundation. Please welcome Abbas. I was informed right before the panel that time is not our best ally today, so we will condense much of the conversation. I will ask each of the panelists 2 questions, one general question, which will set the scene for the conversation, and I will request if you could answer in around 2 minutes each. That will be helpful. And then each of one of you will have one specific question which is relevant to your background and the work you do on a normal basis. So given the fact that East Africa is one of the hotspots in the world in terms of the impact of climate and environmental catastrophes, given the frequency of droughts, extreme rainfalls in the region, how can East Africa community collaborate to enhance regional adaptation, since that's the goal, and build resilience among our communities, especially in the vulnerable areas, in the vulnerable countries like Somalia? I will begin with Dr. Ulu and then go next, please.
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Okash, for having me and to give me the opportunity to be part of this perfectly organized conference. I'm really, really happy to meet all of my colleagues on this panel to talk about these issues that are so important to all of us, and I think nobody here in this room would deny the importance of this issue. So one thing that is important to me is that especially our international guests know what it's about when we talk about climate change issues in Somalia. So just to give an example what it means to you here in Somalia, when you think about changing rainfall patterns, you have the problem, one of the main problems in Somalia, that you've got flash floods. And you've got flooding in the big rivers of Shabelle and Juba. And there's a certain point in the middle of Somalia where every year, every rainy season, problems occur. And this is the region of Johar in Hirshabelle State. We've got a certain special situation. You've got the Shabelle River who changes its form there. You've got this river who forms canals, water basins, and so on, and the water changes its way and causes floodings, destroys crops, destroys settlements, and one major problem is that you can't save this water there for the dry seasons. What you find in Johar is a combination of different issues that make it difficult for the society to cope with the changing temperatures and with the changing rainfall patterns. You've got a combination of man-made issues and of natural issues. One natural issue I explained right now, the change of the riverbed. Then you've got man-made causes of the trouble you find there. You've got overgrazing problems, you find soil degradation, and one major problem is also that you find destroyed irrigation structure. In this region of Johar, a big structure was established about 100 years ago to irrigate the fields and to protect people from floodings. This is destroyed. And this is the problem, or one of the problems that cause disaster in this area. So when you talk about the problem that occurs in the communities, in the vulnerable areas, you always have to have in mind that it's a combination of natural and man-made causes. So when the question is what the EAC can do, you have to think about the next level. So the first level of the solution is that you have to be clear about the problem on the ground, on the community level. The second level is the national level. So Somalia has a national adaptation plan and further policies. So my sister Jacinta has just mentioned the Somali National Climate Change Policy, where you find Chapter 5 with strategies and measures to address the problems on the ground. What the EAC can do is provide support, maybe financial support, but strategic support to address those issues you are tackling with the national strategy. So when you want to cooperate with the East African community in Somalia, you have to make sure to connect these different levels. So your community level, where the disasters are happening, the national level with your programs and measures, and the EAC level with the strategies there. And you have to match all of these. And now Somalia is a new member to the EAC, but my recommendation is that by working in the committees, that you are clear about your needs, your special needs, and transport them into the EAC strategies. So this might be a solution, and what's important for me is you need to create data of scientific value. Data about the floodings, about the change of the rivers, about agriculture. When you're on the EAC level, you have to prove that your ideas are secure. So you have to invest maybe in cooperations with other universities to make sure there's enough data, and then you can try to address your specific issues in Somalia to the EAC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You talked about a very key aspect which we'll tackle later on. I want to go now to Mr. Ahmed. from the perspective of, I guess, Ahmed, from the perspective of Somali government, how can we enhance regional adaptation strategies and build resilience for the benefit of Somalia?
Thank you so much, Ukash, first of all, for bringing together this panel. And I thank the panelists who are also sitting, participating in this important meeting. I also wanted to welcome and thank the other participants and other delegates who are, some of them travel from the outside of the country, while others are within the country. I would like to welcome again, and we are very pleased to be part of this important meeting. First of all, I was among the nominated delegates, those who has been discussing other EAC member states on the issues of Somalia's accession or joining some time back. And one of the major discussions that we had, very, very deep discussions, was that how can Somalia, within EAC, can protect the environmental issues. And I remember some of the missions, those who came to Mogadishu, we had a number of meetings, and then there was issues that we have discussed. And then we had other meetings in Nairobi, and there were some issues that have been discussed regarding on the implementation of multilateral environmental agreements in Somalia. Apart from that, Somalia and other East Africa member states face a number of same challenges that we are all of us aware. Number one is the climate change, increase in temperature, and rainfall variability, extreme weather events are impacting agricultural, water resources, and human health across the region. We are aware what happened just for the last 1 month, the floods that has been destroyed a lot of roads, a lot of infrastructure in Somalia, in Kenya, and a number of other EAC member states. The other challenge that the EAC is facing is the biodiversity loss, habitat destruction, poaching, and unsustainable land use practices threaten the real biodiversity of East Africa. The other issues that the East Africa member states is facing is the resource management, over-exploitation of the natural resources, including deforestation and water scarcity. This is also another challenge that the EAC member states are facing. Another challenge which is common is the lack of enough resources to tackle these challenges that I have mentioned now. So what is the importance here? How can EAC collaborate? I think that was your question. First of all, there are a number of areas that the regional cooperation can be benefited. Number one is the harmonization of the regulation and policies. I think ensuring that environmental laws and standards are consistent across the borders prevent regulatory the issues. Number two is sharing best practices. Also, I think bringing together some resources, coordinated response in terms of floods and droughts, and also working together to the issues of climate mobility, or such as climate displaced persons, pastoralists that cross the border between the East Africa member states. And the other one is, for example, working together for the regional issues and to implement a global multilateral environmental agreements. I'm talking United Nations Convention on Climate Change, United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, and United Nations Convention on Desertification. One of the other issues that I think EAC needs is to issues of capacity building and knowledge sharing. That it's another issue. Conducting joint training programs and workshops to enhance the capacity of environmental professionals across the region. Create a regional database. I think that the doctor has also talked on that because we need to have those information and data, what's going in Somalia, what's going in Kenya, what's going maybe Tanzania and many others. So those are some areas that I think the
Thank
EAC
you.
can collaborate.
Thank you. Very practical points. And I want to go to Abbas. What's your take on the same question? If you could summarize in a few review minutes, 2 minutes, would be good.
Thank you, Akash, for welcoming me to this important event. I think a lot has been said regarding integration of or harmonization of policies, rather. Dr. Jacinta has, presented the different policies available in East Africa. I think what East Africa community can do now is to really understand what are the unique challenges, climate-related challenges in Somalia. And we all understand that as much as climate change is visible in all, East Africa countries, each country is facing its own climate challenges. So we need to understand what are those challenges and see how they can be incorporated into the, East Africa policies, which probably has been written before Somalia or the newly, the new countries joined the bloc. And I think, a lot has been said also on capacity building, knowledge sharing, and all that. It's very important that we tap on or leverage, the indigenous knowledges of the communities in all East African countries. Communities have been facing the impact of climate change for many years, and they have their own ways of adapting to the impact of climate change. And lastly, on policy, it's very important these conversations do not only take place at the upper echelons of policy making, but rather at the community level who are facing the impact of climate change. Thank you.
Excellent. Nice words. Abdul Latif.
Yeah, thank you, Kash. I think the team has already covered the answers, but I want to add 3 more points. As East African community, we have to improve how we coordinate and share information across the region. Maybe we can set up a task force or knowledge sharing platforms where we can change information and latest research and updates so that we can also share the best practices, as the DJ Ahmed mentioned it, on climate adaptation and resilience. So through that we can learn each other from the effects and how we to face these challenges and harmonize our adaptation and resilience strategies. Another point is that when it comes to agriculture, which is the main economic activities in our East African community and the main backbone of our lives and livelihoods in our East African community, we have to be smarter about it. We have to promote climate smart agriculture. We have to also promote the drought-resistant crop varieties, sustainable farming techniques, and early warning systems, in order to help our farmers and pastoralists to take better decisions. So it's also important to invest in climate resilient infrastructure, such as the water storage capacities and irrigation systems. We can't also forget about the communities themselves, because they are the ones who are in the front lines of climate crisis. They are the ones who are experiencing the real impacts of climate change. So we have to make them on board so that they can even share and be part of the designing and implementation of these policies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for mentioning and highlighting the role of community in climate adaptation and mitigation. Lastly, I want to get the take from Hassan from perspective of multilateral institution. You work with the UN and an EAC. You work various countries in the region. Where do you believe, what's your role in enhancing the regional adaptation strategies and building resilience?
Thank you very much, Akash. I think colleagues have already talked about the issue of the need for the harmonization of the different policies, strategies, and frameworks. I just would like to share some practical examples with our audience on the need for that. For example, we all know in the context of, or in the case of Somalia, there is a major issue when it comes to unsustainable charcoal production and export. In 2012, the UN Security Council came up with a resolution, 2036, that banned the export of and import of charcoal from Somalia. What happened was that the traders who were doing that business came up with an innovative idea of falsifying, export documents and certificates of origin, and getting them from other countries, and then using those certificates to export the charcoal from Somalia to, export that charcoal to those countries. I think the other very important point is, yes, there are so many projects and programs that are going on in the individual countries on adaptation, on resilience building. But I think there is a need to focus on, joint programs. There are some that are already ongoing, but they're quite limited in terms of in both scale and scope. So I think it is very important to invest in major projects that are cutting across the borders on the different, ecosystems, if it is on pastoralism, if it is on water, on the rivers, as well as on groundwater. I think those are the areas that a lot of focus needs to be put in that context.
Yes, I like the fact you talked about capacity building and policy harmonization at the regional level. I want to come to Agasim Ahmed from perspective from Somali government. How EAC can facilitate East African Community Campus State policy harmonization and capacity building initiatives to strengthen our environmental governance and enforcement of those regulations to align the national, regional, and global regulations and standards.
Yeah, thank you so much. So environmental governance is meant having policies and regulations that can govern environment and natural resources that every country has. So going to broader on that, especially on East Africa, I think EAC can, maybe the technical teams regarding environment and climate change sector can make sure that how other member states, what does policies and regulations do they have. In Somalia, for example, we have an environmental policy, climate change policy, environmental law, environmental social impact assessment. And then there are a number of standards, especially air quality, water quality, and many others that we have drafted. But some of the East African communities has a challenge on the implementation of those laws. Just yesterday, we had a very successful meeting regarding on the dissemination on those policies and regulations that the government has developed. So going to broader on that on East Africa, I think develop and implement regional standards for environmental protection that align with international norms. You're aware that there is a number of conventions, climate change convention, biodiversity, and there is also a desertification convention. There is a United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP. I think EAC needs to be aligned on that, and then establish regional environmental regulatory framework to guide national policies and ensures a consistency. For example, East Africa community should maybe has a broader policies and regulations, but every national maybe or every member state or a country can has it is a specific one, because maybe some of the member states they have a ocean and some of them they don't have maybe the sea. So there are always regulations. Some of the member states they focus on agricultural issues, while others focus on pastoral and those who deal with livestock only. So countries they different in terms of national issues. So there are a number of countries those who focus on farming. There are a number of countries who are focused on ocean and blue economy. There are a number of so regulations are going to be different. So I think EAC needs to make sure that every country is put in place the necessary regulations and issues needed. For example, one of the issues that it's very, very important is the environmental social impact assessment. There are a number of huge projects that's going to be implemented, like in Somalia. We need to work on issues of blue economy. We need to work on issues on energy. We need to work on the issues of the improvement of infrastructure. and also maybe building a new cities, building a new airports, new hotels, and many others. So since Somalia is part of EAC, we have to make sure that the regulations that have already developed by EAC, Somalia is going to be implemented on this also. That's why we are fast tracking, having the necessary regulations, and then putting in place. So those are some issues that maybe can be focused on. Thank you.
Yes, you mentioned yesterday you had an event about environmental law. Could you elaborate more for the audience to understand what was happening yesterday for your event and how does it relate to East Africa community?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, during the discussion of joining Somalia, East Africa, there was a question that our delegation has been posed or asked. That question was that how Somalia can implement multilateral environmental agreements. Multilateral environmental agreements are agreements that has been agreed globally, but when it comes to the East Africa, we need to implement it because we are part of the global communities. So to implement on that, we should have a national environmental law, we should have climate change policy, we should have environmental policy, and we should have environmental social impact assessment regulations. The government has already developed those things and cabinet have already endorsed, and the parliamentarian discussed, and even president has signed into law. The first time, I think it was April, the first Somali environmental law that we never have on that. So I think those regulations are necessary to protect on natural resources, to protect on environment, and also to deal on climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Climate crisis. In light, we're talking about climate crisis. Dr. Ulu, how can we improve disaster response systems in the region and early warning systems to prevent or mitigate the risks of climates in the region?
Okay, thank you for this question. I was talking about levels that have to be connected when you want to get help from the East African community to solve your problems on the ground. And when it comes to disasters, you also have these three levels. So on the ground, you've got the community level with the people who are affected by the floods and by the drought. And you've got the national level with the national policies and plans and legal framework and administration. And then you've got the EAC level, where even in the EAC founding treaty, you find aspects of disaster protection and support in cases of disaster. So this is the concept, this is the hierarchy. And when you look into the EAC legal framework when it comes to disasters, you find that EAC member states support each other by delivering information, data. They support each other when it comes to early warning. They support each other when it comes to building or improving flood security systems. But what the EAC needs is the national strategy. They need a national framework and national policy where they can give their support in. And this is a problem when it comes to the situation in Somalia. So you have to take a closer look at the national level when it comes to disaster. I'm really looking forward to the next chapters of the Constitution, where I hope that the basis or the basic rules for disaster prevention and management will be fixed and legalized. And after that, you can build on your legal framework when it comes to disaster management and prevention. You can then develop your policies. And what's really, really important when it comes to disaster management and prevention is the administration. You have to have a big focus on the administration. You will need resources for that. That may be a point where the EAC could support you, but they will only support you if there's something there. And this will be a lot of hard work in the next years, but it's absolutely important and necessary. It's the thing you need to connect these three levels, the community level, the national level, and the EAC level. And in the meantime, I would love to see that communities are educated when it comes to disaster. You can provide basic training to everybody, that everybody can help themselves, that they know what to do when they get a warning. So I know some warning systems are tested or implemented, but it's the next question, what do you do with the warning? So when you're in Doha, in the rural areas and get a warning, what are you doing then? How do you protect your family and your crops and your values and your animals? And that would be, I think, a good point to start from, to educate the communities, to tell them how to protect themselves, how to find safe ways out of a disaster zone, and maybe to start kind of volunteering system. It's not that complicated. You can do a lot with basic information, with basic training, and this is something the Somali community and society and mentality is, I think, all about, to support each other and just do the things that are possible. And I would really love to see how basic training for everybody, for kids and youth and adults, is implemented to come over this maybe long-lasting task to build up at the national level until the EAC can help you with financing, with advising, and other support. So I would love to see that.
Yeah, well, that is a brilliant suggestion. How many of you had a first aid training? How many of you had first aid training? Wow, great. So Dr. Olu is suggesting we need to have similar training for climate response, disaster response. Like all of us, we should get a basic training that we can respond to when it comes to disasters. How can you save yourself? How can you save your family and your community? So that's, I think, a very impressive take on that. For the audience, we are about the last few minutes of the conversation. We will come to you. So in case you have any question or comment, please take a note. Abbas, you talked about earlier about community and community to be included in this conversation. So we need to democratize this high-level conversation at the community level. And the communities usually are known in environmental conservation efforts. So given the fact that the realities we live in with the climate disasters, deforestation, land degradation, water scarcity, how do you think we can promote sustainable practices and invest and encourage conservation initiatives across communities within the region? Yeah, Abbas, the mic.
Thank you, Ukash. The East Africa community can encourage conservation at the community level by, first of all, developing policies that discourage, deforestation or cutting trees for charcoal production, but also provide them with alternative means of fuel, because the only reason why they're cutting the trees is, to use it for fuel, and also educate them in terms of, the importance of trees, planting trees, and also, the problems that comes with cutting trees and deforestation. And this can be done from at an early age, and by including it in the school curriculum, and instilling the children at an early age on the importance of trees and, planting trees and all that. So this campaign is extremely, extremely important to do it at an early age. So the other ways is to support the community's local initiatives of protecting trees, protecting plants, protecting the environment, and avoiding adverse community practices against the environment. And also including, for the fishing community, also support the fishing community from, not depleting the fishing stock and using, methods that deplete the fishing stock, and other alternative means. And this can be done through information sharing from other countries in the East African countries. There could be projects that are implemented that are successful in other countries that can be replicated in Somalia, again, depending on the context, making it context specific. I think there's a lot of information and knowledge sharing that can be done through the East Africa community, which can be replicated. And lastly, I would like to emphasize on the importance of neighborliness, particularly Kenya and Somalia. And there are so many pastoral communities across, along the border. And when they're hit by drought, they move from one country to the other in search of, So that kind of cooperation and collaboration is extremely important. But also creating some sort of protected areas for grazing of livestock, particularly along the border areas. And these kind of ideas will be very important for adaptation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Whenever we talk about climate interventions with adaptation or mitigation, then the next thing comes up is resources. How do we mobilize resources? Climate finance. So Hassan from UNDP, UN does a lot of resource mobilization. So what do you think, how can we mobilize the right resources and secure enough funding for environmental initiatives, whether at a local level, national level, or a regional level?
I think that's a very good and very important question. And at the East Africa community level, I think the most important point would be, are we doing joint resource mobilization? Or what is happening now is, each country is trying to mobilize resources from the bilateral donors and as well as from the vertical funds, the GCF, GF, and the adaptation fund. I think it would be more stronger if the East African community could do joint resource mobilization initiative, both from the bilateral as well as from the multilateral donors. So in the context, for example, some countries are just struggling to get some tens of millions of dollars, but I think that is just a drop in the ocean. It will not solve the adaptation funding requirements for even one country. So I think we have to first combine our initiative and do joint resource mobilization initiatives. Currently, it is ongoing, but it's only done by regional organizations like IGAD or some of the UN offices.
But who has to pay this money? When there's a flooding in Kenya or drought in Somalia, who has to pay that amount of money to save lives in these communities? And keep in mind that Africa has minimum contribution of greenhouse gas emissions, around 4%. Who has to pay that money?
Exactly. I think you must have seen the debate in the last COP on the loss and damage of, on the impact of climate change. I think we have to get, as East African community, get prepared for that, for those discussions, and engage as, with one voice. Then that makes the voice of the East African community stronger, and it will be heard, much bigger in the international platforms. I think the other areas that are open are, public-private partnerships within the different countries in the community. The governments have to encourage the private sector to invest in green, transition and green investments. The other point is on joint ventures. If companies from Kenya and Somalia could jointly invest in green investment, we have to also look into the area of, innovative financing mechanisms like carbon credits. Countries are now doing some pilots, but it is still very, very low in the East Africa. Green bonds is another innovative financing modality that can be looked into. Crowdfunding at the community level, given the issue of the diaspora, particularly for the case of Somalia. And we have seen some of the communities already making contributions in Beledweyne and Johar in adapting, in trying to solve the issue of flooding of the Shabelle River. So I think those are important points to look at. Harmonizing the policies and regulatory frameworks for resource mobilization is also a key factor in this case.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, Abdi Latif Omar, you are coming from a civil society, academia. What is the role of those sectors in this conversation? How do they contribute regional climate adaptation and building resilience? What is their role? What there has to be done?
Yeah. Thank you, Akash. First of all, the civil society organizations and research and academic institutions have to work together to tackle these the growing issues. So they have to build a strong partnership between them and make sure that they have that close relationship, because both of them, they have that complementary strengths, where civil society organizations have that deep connection with the local communities and grassroots, and the academia and research institutions brings the scientific research and the technical knowledge. So by collaborating them, they can generate a strong and evidence-based research that can guide East African communities and reflect the realities on the ground. The second thing is that they have to make sure that these researches are translated into policies, and this is where civil society groups can come in and support by using their advocacy skills to translate these all policies, these all researches into research through highlighting the key findings and recommendations from the research. They can also work closely within the East African community policymakers and ensure all these policies are included into the regional environmental plans and programs. At the same time, academia can provide also that independent and expert advice to guide the policymaking process. But it is also not enough to just have policies on paper.
Yep.
So we have to engage with the communities and public and ensure they are investing in the implementation of all these policies and adaptation strategies. So that is the role of both academia and the civil society organizations, because they are the ones who can come up with the creative public awareness campaigns, drawing the outreach of their abilities to reach the communities. So they can also use everything from community workshops and digital media, so that they can spread the word and empower the citizens to take real actions and participate in the climate adaptation and resilience strategies.
Thank you very much. The role of the community has been highlighted. So that's very key. We need to develop a people-centered policies program, people-centered programs to deal with climate issues and build resilience and adaptation mechanisms. So before I conclude the panel, I may take a few questions, not more than 3. Please raise your hand for those of you who have a questions. Okay, I see 4 hands. Maybe we will take all those 4.
It's a quick reminder, please make your questions clear and concise, and additionally you can provide background to history, but make sure it's not too long.
Thank you, moderator. I'm John Bosco Karisa from East African Business Council. I want to congratulate the panelists, especially on tackling this issue of climate change. My question is very simple and precise. And when you look at the climate change, I always use 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit. In all the discussion, I didn't hear the role of the private sector in climate mitigation. And I'm directing the question from my good friend from Germany. How do you mobilize the private sector in terms of building resilience, in terms of adaptation, in terms of mitigation? That's the only solution that we would be able to tackle this problem. Last year we did a study, East African Business Council with USAID. The biodiversity loss in East Africa is $10 billion per annum. And there is an urgent call to mobilize the resources for that to mitigate the climate change. So my question is that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Next. Please, again, raise your hand. Please give him.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, all of you. And my name is Bashir from Somali National University. So I want to ask a direct question, maybe the DG. And as you said before, Africa has less contribute to the global emission or CO2. So what are the chances for the East African community for the access of the global compensation for the global one? Because we know in highly industrialized countries has contributed much emissionless Africa or less in the Eastern Africa. So what are the chances for the access that global fund for the compensation of the climate and
Thank you.
crisis?
Yeah, the question is clear. This side, please. Here. The gentleman with the red tie. Yeah.
Thank you very much, professional moderator, and really a professional panel discussion here. Environment really is a very, very big area and interesting. And as you know, environmental issues internationally, environmental law, environmental policy, environmental economy, environmental awareness, environmental conservative, international, a lot of subjects, and we cannot really have time to discuss here today. But I would like to focus about Somalia and environment, which is really, I can tell that our Prime Minister, that today we have Ministry of Environment, first time ever in history in Somalia. Therefore, it's really interesting. As you know, in 1972, from Rio de Janeiro until today.
If you could just go to question, will it be helpful?
Yeah, I would like to comment. I don't have question. Okay. 1972 in Rio de Janeiro, it was really the start of that. We are talking about over 50 years now. And Somalia is just starting that. What I would like to comment is the ministry, high-level person is sitting here. Somalia ready to sign international environmental protocols? If the answer is yes, some of them are politicized, some of them is not unanimously accepted internationally. Therefore, I would like to comment to be very careful if you want to sign international protocols, particularly some of the energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There was one last question. I would recommend if you get a question from the female audience, will be very good. Okay. That gentleman with the blue jacket, yeah. Sorry, we couldn't find a female. I think this was a question.
Thank you, Akash. I've got two questions, and any of the panelists could respond to that.
Make it one. Make it one, please.
Okay. I'll ask on the incentives that are available for the youths, because I think they play a key role in terms of addressing matters climate. Because I know the youth could struggle in terms of getting the resources that they could use to address some of these issues. So whether we could be able to find whether it's a kitty or funds available that we could use for the same.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Who are you addressing to your question?
Any person could respond.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have only 3 questions here. Doctor, let me start with you. The Chamber of Commerce, the East Africa Chamber of Commerce asked the role of private sector in climate issues, in tackling climate issues.
Yes, John Bosco Khaliza, I know that this is a top issue for you. You are addressing it every time there's an occasion, and I think it's absolutely crucial to become clear how the sharing of responsibilities is working or shall work in Somalia in the future. So you always have, in every country, in every society, a specific sharing of responsibilities when it comes to providing public goods. Public goods are a good society, our healthcare system, our street schools, and so on, and also an intact environment. In the country of Somalia, we have a state that is not as present as, for example, in Germany. So in Germany, the state is offering nearly all public goods. It could be here that it's the opposite, but that's totally okay. You have to become clear as private sector, what do you want? You can't do everything yourself when it comes to the private sector. You can't build up this big irrigation structures around Johar. That's too much for the public sector. You can't build all the streets alone. You need the state in a specific way. You need a state for the big infrastructure responsibilities. And that's a question I have in mind, and I'm watching. What do you want as a Somali society? How do you share the responsibilities? And you negotiated since ever, like every society, and now there's a special dynamic because everything is mixed up, and now you're able to create the responsibility sharing that you want, that works for you. And I would love to see how you're developing your unique own system that is working for the Somali society, and the private sector has to play important role, but in combination with the state, what the state can offer to you as framework. Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how you're going from here and what's happening in the next 5 or 10 years when it comes to environment. Thank you.
Thank you. There was another question from a gentleman who asked about compensation chances for Somalia to attract more climate funding to deal with issues. Ahmed, maybe if you could make it less than a minute, could be fine.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. And regarding the question on EAC emissions and also the access on climate finance, yes, it is true that the EAC member state contributes very less when it comes to the emissions, those who make a lot of crisis on the planet. But we are one of the most areas that has been affected by climate crisis. You know Somalia, you know what happened in Kenya, and many others. So how can we access on climate finance? That has been discussed in many areas, I think. And there are number of funds and windows that has been globally agreed, Green Climate Fund, Global Environmental Facility, Adaptation Fund, and many others. But there was a question nowadays, are we benefiting these windows that has been assigned to these funds? It seems no. So there are also some leaders who have advocating nowadays to change that mind of financial structure, especially on President Kenya has been discussing this in America and others. Yes. So I think we need to focus on 4 areas to get more funds and access on those things. First of all, to have a specific group on climate negotiators on East Africa, and I think it's there now, led by one of the, already is there, but we need to support those guys because are the guys who can share the global on what happens in EAC already. And then we have to also agree, I think, like loss and damage. It has been agreed in COP28. It's going to be discussed in COP29. I think our leaders, especially the presidents of EAC, needs to clearly share the global leaders on the challenges that we are facing. That's going to support, like the ministries of climate and environment, to submit proposals and projects to those windows, and it's going to facilitate on that. So I think we need to support on knowledge. We need to improve the communication, and we need to share a solid and well-designed projects and proposals regarding on water, energy, blue economy on the
Okay.
global, and then we can benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Lastly, Abdulrazak, what are the incentives for youth who are dealing with climate issues? Are there any funding opportunities for them from the perspective of the UN? Are there any incentives in place?
The youth can play a very significant role in climate change adaptation. The problem I just raised on the charcoal, we once tried in one of UNDP's project an open call for youth in Somalia to come up with innovative ideas, to come up with homegrown solutions. And we couldn't believe the amount of and the number of the innovative solutions that they came up with. So there is, the youth have got the ideas, and they have the innovativeness that it requires, but the missing link here is the funding and the coaching and the capacity building that will take them to the next level. So in that open call to crowdsource homegrown solutions, I remember one of the youth that got the funding was, he came an idea with producing charcoal from invasive species, like Prosopis juliflora. And that business is very successful now, and it's working. So that showcases that the youth have got ideas to counter, the environmental issues.
Thank you.
in
Thank
the
you very
region.
much.
Thank you.
You will all agree with me that we love to continue this conversation, but due to time, we couldn't do that. Sorry. I have to forgive some of my questions, and I apologize for those of you who would love to ask, maybe to comment, maybe next time. So we talked about capacity building, community engagement, resource mobilization, and policy harmonization. Those are very high-level issues, and I hope we will democratize those conversations to a local level, and that's what we do as an institute. So thank you very much. A big round of applause to my panel, and that's the end of the panel.
Thank you so much, Okash, and the panelists for your wonderful insights and experience that you have shared with us. I would like now to welcome Dr. Idris Ahmed Rai, who will present on the opportunities and challenges in the higher education institutions in East Africa. Dr. Rai, please make your way to the stage. Dr. Rai? Yes, here he is. Big round of applause for Dr. Rai. He's also part of the organizers. He's also a professor. Welcome.
Apologies, Doctor. Before you proceed, may I ask the panelists to come to the stage for a photo group, and then we will proceed to the next. Apologies.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What do you say? Say tahai. Say tahai. Say tahai. Habari zenu. I'm testing the readiness for East African community, right? So habari zenu. Habari. Bonjour. So these are East African languages, so we need to be acquainted. Swahili, French, English. Can someone load my presentation, please? Yeah? Okay, yeah. The slides. Where do I put it? This is fine. Okay, thank you. With the help of technology. My name is Professor Idris Rai. I'm the Deputy Executive Secretary of the Inter-University Council for East Africa, based in Kampala, Uganda. And the title of my keynote today is Opportunities and Challenges for Higher Education Institutions. I think it's not complete. It's about common higher education area, opportunities and challenges for higher education institutions in the region. So let's start with the basics. What is common higher education area? It's an obvious question that people may ask. Common higher education area refers to a group of countries that have formally agreed to harmonize their higher education systems. A group of countries that have formally agreed to harmonize their higher education system. The objective of having a common higher education area, therefore, is having comparable qualifications built upon common quality standards for mutual recognition of qualifications, mobility of students, free movement of labor, and regional integration. So there are a few keywords here. For common higher education area to happen, you need to have agreed qualifications that are built upon quality standards, minimum quality standards, for mutual recognition, mobility of students, movement of labor, and regional integration. And there are a number of key features or elements of harmonization. How do we harmonize education systems for a number of different countries? Now, there are few elements that are key in harmonization. The first one is standardized quality assurance systems. So countries agree on standard quality assurance systems and tools. Common qualification framework. They agree on cycles in higher education system. How many years will it take bachelor's? And what will it call it? How many years will it take master's? How many years will it take PhD? And so on and so forth. Student mobility. Common higher education area always will have a component of student mobility, credit transfer, and labor movement. So these are the key elements for any common higher education area framework that is existing in the world. So you might have all of them, but they're all not necessary, particularly for labor movement or regional integration. Now, examples of common higher education area is European higher education area. I think it's common, built upon or based upon what is called as Bologna Declaration. Countries where the region is Europe, was established in 1999. 49 countries, including all EU member states and many others, agree into that common education area. The key objectives of European Common Higher Education Area include student mobility and employability, harmonization of degree structures, quality assurance processes, recognition of qualifications based on European qualification framework, as well as fostering integrated European labor market. Another example is what is called as SIMAO, that stands for Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, Higher Education Area. It's in the Southeast, countries include Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and others, 11 countries. And their key objective is to promote regional integration, credit transfer systems, quality assurance standards, and joint degree programs. Another example is Andean Region Higher Education Area, which is in the Andre region. As you can see, this is western side of South America, include Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. And the key objective here is mobility, faculty exchange, and collaborative research. They don't have the element of regional integration here. Now, what about East African Community Common Higher Education Area, which is the key for this keynote? So the partner states, or the summit of East African Community, these are the head of state, declared in May 2017 that East Africa, or declared East African Community as a common higher education area. And this is the declaration, as you see. At that time, we had 6 partner states. So you see 6 signatures there of the presidents of East African Community then. Any new member state that signs the Treaty of East African Community also subscribes, becomes a member of East African Community Common Higher Education Area. So I can't read all of it, but I try to zoom a bit here, which is important. This is part of the declaration. The Declaration of East African Community as a Common Higher Education Area came as a result of the work that was done already within East African Community related to higher education. And if I can read this for you, the Common Higher Education Area, from the declaration, it says, it came as a recognition for higher education, including research, as the leading pillar in creating a knowledge society and knowledge-driven community, and having reviewed the progress so far made towards objective, in particular, the development and adoption of by national commissions and councils for higher education in the partner states on the following items. So there's a recognition of the following items specifically that led to the declaration of East African Community as a common higher education area. And these items are regional qualification framework. The second one was East African qualification framework, regional quality assurance framework is the first one. The second one is East African qualification framework for higher education. The third one is staff mobility framework. And the fourth one is students mobility policy. So common higher education area is a process built upon a number of components related to harmonizing higher education systems. When the declaration was made in 2017, some of these elements were already achieved and were implemented in the partner states. Again, any new member of East African Community is also expected to adopt some of these tools that are already implemented in some other countries to harmonize the education system in the region. Now, East African Common Higher Education Area, therefore, is based upon harmonizing higher education systems in East African Community based on quality standards, qualifications, mobility of students, staff, and movement of skilled labor. Now, this declaration expanded the mandate of the Inter-University Council for East Africa to include operationalization of the Common Higher Education Area. So what is Inter-University Council for East Africa? This is next. Inter-University Council for East Africa is one of the institutions of the East African community. There are about 9 institutions of East African community. Now, this institution is particularly responsible for advising the partner states on all matters related to higher education. Now, Inter-University Council for East Africa was established by IUCEA Protocol 2002 and IUCEA Act of 2009. And its vision is to become a leading EAC institution for exemplary common higher education area for a prosperous and sustainable East African community. And the mission of the Inter-University Council for East Africa is to encourage development of mutually beneficial collaboration between member universities and between them and governments and other organizations, both public and private. So the mandate and functions of the Inter-University Council for East Africa, which operationalizes the Common Higher Education Area, is stipulated within EAC Treaty Article 5 and 10.5, which is to advise, develop, and coordinate all matters related to higher education and research in the community. And the functions of the Inter-University Council for East Africa are also stipulated in detail in the Protocol 2002 of Article 5, as well as IUCEA Act of 2009, Article 6. Very detailed functions, all anchored upon higher education advisory, based on the policy advocacy, based on capacity building, based on collaborations, and so on and so forth. I'll skip that one. Now, there are a number of achievements that Inter-University Council for East Africa has achieved that has led to the declaration of the Common Higher Education Area, as I said earlier. One of it is quality assurance. So IUCEA has developed a common frame of reference guiding the development and practices of a common quality assurance culture in the East African community. Now, among the tools that IUCEA has developed include principles and guidelines for quality assurance in higher education in East Africa. You have some documentation there. And handbook for quality assurance in higher education, titled Roadmap to Quality, in 5 volumes. Now, many members, many East African community partners are already implementing these tools that are available. Now we are also expecting Somalia to adopt and try to see how they can adapt these kind of tools as well to harmonize higher education system. Some more tools. And the other achievement of Inter-University Council for East Africa in harmonization of the system is what we call regional program accreditation. So this is a voluntary process whereby a university may want to accredit its programs regionally, and once a program has been accredited by IUCEA, then that program is already acceptable and recognized in all partner states in the region. So those tools are also developed or are developed by Inter-University Council for East Africa. Another one as achievement is on development of qualification framework. This is called Harmonized Qualification Framework for East African Community. It's a framework for harmonization of higher education and training systems in the region that is aimed at fostering mutual recognition, international comparability of qualifications in the region, promoting workers and learners' mobility, including credit accumulation and transfer, as well as facilitating lifelong learning in the region. Another accomplishment of IUCEA that fostered the implementation of common higher education area is development of benchmarks. We have at Inter-University Council for East Africa what we call East African Community Qualification Framework or Qualification Program Benchmarking Policy. So we develop benchmark for common programs that are run in universities. So whenever a university wants to develop a similar program in a partner states, they are based on that minimum standards that are already developed by Inter-University Council for East Africa. And the development process of these benchmarks also includes or also involves the participation of councils and commission for higher education of the partner states. And they are the ones to guide the institutions in using of those benchmarks. The other achievement is on staff mobility. We do have programs at the University Council for East Africa on staff mobility, whereby staff from one university in the region is able to go and spend one semester in another university in the region on teaching, research, and any academic activities. And it's a very popular program, so staff from university from Somalia can get ready for it. But your institution has to be a member, which is not a big problem. Another achievement that we have recorded at the Inter-University Council for East Africa is on student mobility or scholarship programs. And the scholarship programs are run by using projects and different programs. So these are some of the programs and projects that we have at IUCEA that have the elements of students' mobility. We have programs that are regional mobility, whereby students move from one country to another. Some of the programs here are, well, World Bank funded programs. Some of them are funded by Federal Republic of Germany, Government of Germany, and some of them are East African-born scholarships program like EAC SMS, whereby the students benefit by these programs, but the condition is they have to study in a country not of their own residence. Now this for the youth, get ready. Now that you are in the East African community, these are the opportunities available and are waiting for you. Now we have those programs that are done regionally, and we have programs that are done internationally. This is one of the programs that we have with one university in South Korea, and I think it was advertised as well for Somali youth. This is the first program that we have advertised for Somali youth as well. Now we are in the short listing. I think some students have been selected, and I think soon some students will be informed and they will be able to go and study in South Korea. This is the first cohort that graduated last year. Now, other activities include capacity building. We do have a lot of capacity building activities, particularly for our member institutions that are based on research and innovation, training of assessors, of EAC program of accreditation. We do train quality assurance experts in universities. We do train on innovative pedagogical skills. We do train supervisors for postgraduate studies. We do train on higher education leadership, academic writing and publishing, and so on and so forth. There are plenty of opportunities awaiting for member institutions to join at Inter-University Council for East Africa. Now, the other activity that we do, achievement, is we do organize networking activities in terms of conferences and collaborative networks. These are many. They are increasing every day. I don't have time to explain all of them, but we do have annual conferences and meetings. We're going to have one in Juba in July, and you are all invited. We do have what we call Quality Assurance Network that meets every year with the quality assurance experts. We do have a network on regional integration, research, and academic. We do have a forum of East African communities' national education and research networks. This is like Somali RAIN, and so on and so forth. Now, what are the benefits of East African Community Common Education Area? It's about enhancing and assuring quality. It's about harmonizing qualifications. It's about mutually recognition of qualifications so that students can move from one country and another, study and work without obstacles. It's about enhancing employability and free labor movement in the region. It's about capacity building. It's about collaborations and partnership. It's about fostering regional integration in the region. Now, the challenges, there are a few. As I said, it's a process. Common education area is a process, and it involves a lot of elements to harmonize our education system. But there are a number of challenges that makes this process not as fast as we would expect. One is diverse educational systems in partner states. We have South Sudan, we have DRC, we have Somalia, we have original East African, they have diverse education systems. Now we have some partner states that have been there for a long time. They have been implementing the instruments we've developed, and they're at a very good level. But there are new countries like Somalia, they're just starting. It's going to take time for them to adopt this kind of instruments and then to catch up with the harmonization process. Economic disparity among partner states, hence varying pace of implementation of agreed instruments, the slow adoption, lack of legal instruments for enforcing. Remember, IUCEA is only advisory institution. We only advise the partner states. It's up to the partner states themselves to put on laws and to enforce the implementation of whatever instruments or whatever advisory that we offer. And we don't have an influence into that. Now, sometimes it takes a long time for partner states to harmonize or to integrate these policies with their own education system. So that is all what I wanted to present to you. Thank you for listening. Mahat Sanit. Asante, merci, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Idris Rai from the Inter-University Council of East Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to welcome our next panel discussion. It's on legal transformation for EAC integration. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the panelists and the moderator. We'll start with the moderator. He's the senior lecturer at the Faculty of Law. He's a senior lecturer and also part of the Faculty of Law at Somali National University. Mr. Saeed Osman Bashir, please make your way to the stage. And followed by his panelist, senior legal advisor, Advocate Abdulkadir Mohammed. Please give them a big round of applause. Followed by the Commissioner of the Law Reform Commission of Tanzania, Dr. Eid Ramadan Mandi. Followed by Professor Dr. Alexandra Streckberg, I hope I pronounced your name right. He's a professor of political science and African politics and development at the University of Beirut. And finally, Professor of Somali National University, Senior Legal Advisor to the Somali Parliament and the Independent Constitutional Review Commission, Professor Abdulkadir Yusuf. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for all the panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Said Osman Bashir. I'll be the moderator for the next 30 minutes maximum. But before I commence our activity, for the sake of reference and for my students, I just wanted to clarify some few points as a takeaway points for educational purpose. First, East Africa Community stands as a testament to enduring pursuit of regional integration and cooperation of East African countries. It was formed in 1967, but unfortunately, it did not go on. In 1999, it was redesigned again, and the integration took place between 1897 until now, 2024. The East African Community has a governance structure. The governance structure is comprised of the Council of Ministers, the coordinating committees, the courts of justice, East Africa Legislative Assembly, and the Secretariat. They are responsible for administrative, legal, and all other issues. East African Community was integrated upon 4 pillars, and it's very important. As a student, you have to note down this. East African Community is anchored by 4 foundational pillars. 1, the customs union, the common market, the monetary union, and the political federation. That is what we are going to talk about now. Each and every pillar represents a crucial stage in the evolution of regional integration. Collectively, they shape trajectory and the direction of East Africa Community. The customs union was created in order to collaborate and facilitate free movement of goods and services. The common market was created in 2010, and its protocol entered into force in 2010. It is for regulating and cooperating capital and labor. The monetary union is responsible for harmonizing monetary and fiscal policies. The political federations is responsible for shared governance and political identity. That political federation protocol was signed in July 2005. Those are the key takeaway points that I wanted to emphasize as a point of reference. Now, through my panel, we are going to discuss 4 key issues, but unfortunately, we are going to have only 20 minutes to do so. I don't know how we are going to manage it. We are going to discuss capacity building, political federation, and international copyrights, patents, and trademarks issues. If my panel, I would like to introduce my panel. They have been introduced, but I would like to reintroduce them again. On my left is Professor Abdelkader Yusuf. He is professor at Somali National University. He is also a legal advisor to the Somalia Parliament, and also is a member to the Independent Review Commission of the Constitution. Next to him is Advocate Abdul Qadir Mohammed Tahlil. He is a corporate lawyer and specializes in corporate issues. Next to him is Dr. Eid Ramadan. You have seen him before presenting his paper. He is the commissioner of the Law Reform Commission of Tanzania and also a university lecturer. Next to him, last but not the least, is Professor Dr. Alexandra Stroh-Steckelberg. I pronounced it right? Thank you. He is the professor of political science, African politics, and development policy. Those are my panels, and we are going to go straight into our questions. I will start with Professor Alexander. Most of the people, Professor, were talking about Somalia integrating into East African community. I want to start it from the other way around. How is East African community going to integrate Somalia into their system?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good change of perspective here at this point in the conference, but let me thank the conference organizers for making me part of this wonderful discussion and this wonderful meeting. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about and learned a lot about Somalia's perspective on entering the EAC, but there is also the other way around. It's a task for the East African community to discuss and adapt its own modes of working and also the institutional framework in order to be ready for now 8 members, right? So the treaty was designed when there were 3 members, and maybe they had like 5 in mind. And now we're facing a situation where the EAC has rapidly grown, and at the same time is still following a very ambitious agenda. So this is something that has been discussed in political science across the world as a potential tension between efforts of enlargement and efforts of deepening regional integration. That's not necessarily an opposition that you cannot deal with, but what I would like to emphasize here, in order to keep it short, technically the framework of the EAC, the legal framework of the EAC, can accommodate very easily 8 members, right? I mean, if you look at the parliament, the rule is, well, every member states, every partner state sends a certain number of people, so you can simply increase the parliament indeterminately. You can do the same for the summit and the councils. Yeah, simply speaking, you could increase them without any limits. But already, if you look at the court, yeah, with its 15 judges, currently you would be able, right, to still include at least 1 judge from each partner state. But this is maybe already indicating that there is a larger question behind, and that this cannot go on forever, sort of, and that it is changing the setup and the work of the institutions. And I think there is that's a brilliant occasion now to discuss the confederation more deeply, in order to also review these institutions and to ask yourself, so what are the ambitious goals that we prioritize, and how might we need to adapt the institutions in place, or the mode of working within these institutions. But I think it would be it wouldn't be adequate enough to just say, okay, the legal framework makes it possible to increase the number of partner states. So we sit down and relax, and but that's not happening. Yeah, you are having that debate about the confederation, and I'm sure a lot of this is being thought through.
Just to add on that, it is like they have to keep their ideals, their structures, their traditions, and at the same time, they have to integrate Somalia into their own system without interrupting the protocols and the rules that were there before. Okay, just to add on that, I'm still there. What are the structures? There will be decision making, there will be shared issues. Somalia will not be alone again. What are the structures that can be accommodated so that the decision making can be shared through the bloc?
I wouldn't dare to give you answers to this question, but maybe point to a few processes that could be interesting to review.
Yes.
I'm a comparativist, right? So I was very pleased seeing in the previous presentation that we can always learn from other experiences. And in particular in the context of regional integration, the kind of natural habitual reference is the European Union. But sometimes this might not be the framework that comes closest to the context in which other integration processes are actually situated. So what I find very interesting is how, for example, ASEAN has dealt with a similar process of rapid enlargement in the late 1990s, whereas ASEAN has a less ambitious finality. So there is no political federation that they are discussing, which adds something to the degree of difficulty in the East African community. I'm not saying you cannot deal with this difficulty, but you have to acknowledge it in the first place. So how do you balance the ambitious political aims, the security concerns, and the core economic integration questions is something that probably has to be discussed at the political level before you can actually redesign, adapt, revise your institutions in a meaningful way.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for your point. If I come to Professor Dr. Eid, we have said East Africa community is built on 4 issues: economic, market, and there is also political confederation. Will you tell us what is political confederation? Bearing in mind, Somalia is a federal republic also. What is political confederation? And it's all about.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said earlier in my presentation, I'm a member of a team of experts which has been appointed to collect public opinion, stakeholders' views in order to form a confederation. As you may understand, it has just been explained here, there are 4 stages before we reach a political federation. Okay, we start with a customs union, a common market, a monetary union, and then a political confederation. That was the, one could say, that was the schedule. That was those were the stages before we go to a political federation. Now, in 2017, maybe before that time, there were efforts to fast-track that process. There were efforts to fast-track to make sure that we achieve a political union, okay, or which is called a political federation earlier than it was expected, okay? And in that course of discussions, and some people said there were fears and concerns. A committee was formed, went around, collected public opinion, and also the partner states themselves were asked to conduct a sort of research within their territories, and the results indicated that maybe people are not ready at this time. We need more time. So on the basis of those fears and the concerns and the reluctances, they decided now in 2017, let us begin with a confederation. Okay? So, a confederation is something which is not very common in modern days, but in 17th century, 18th century, there were several confederations. The USA began its political life with a confederation.
Yes, yes.
Before they formed the Federal Union in that year, 1789. But also the North German Confederation is also very famous. Canada also began its political life as a confederal union.
Yes.
Okay, and those are the things that we took into account. So when our team was appointed, I was specifically appointed in 2019, and we held our second meeting in Dar es Salaam. We had the first thing that we had to do to sit down, conduct some research, and find out what is a confederation. And that had to be very clear in our minds so that we proceed forward. When we go to a collective public opinion, we have to tell the people what do we think of a confederation. But also, we didn't close that chapter. We also let them tell us what do they think should be the confederation. Now, in the course of those discussions in the team, we agreed a confederation normally is a political association characterized by the following hallmarks. First one is normally the member states or the partner states are normally sovereign. Okay? So in a federal state, the units are not sovereign. They are part of that state. But in a confederation, the units or constituent parts are normally sovereign. So that's one we agreed. The second one is that the government of a confederation, maybe you can call it, I'm calling it a government. I've read one of the philosopher, Kelsen, is saying that is not a confederation, is not a government, maybe. So the authority that is elected normally does not deal with the citizens directly, okay? And that was the feature of all federations before 19th century. Before the American Federation was created, all confederations that existed, they didn't deal directly with the citizens. They dealt with authorities of partner states. So the second hallmark or characteristic feature of a confederation is that the authority that is created does not deal with the citizens directly. I will give one example. So the police officers or the revenue officials that contact with the citizen collecting taxes, those should be members of the governments of partner states. So the confederation government, if we wish to call it a government, works with the governments. It doesn't go to the ground. That's the second characteristic. The third one, normally the members under confederal arrangement, members are free to withdraw. Are free to withdraw. So the EAC now, okay? The EAC itself has confederal features. Of course, somebody can call it a confederation already. There is always a provision which says a member can withdraw because members are sovereign. They exercise that right if they wish or they are not happy, they can withdraw. In Europe, you think, the European Union, okay? The Britain government, Britain withdrew from the European Union. So exercise of that right. Another one, another aspect that we agreed after studying various confederations which were formed in the past was that members should also have the right to dismiss one of their
other members.
Members if they think that member is not complying with the treaty or the constitution, or is breaching some of the rules that are set out in the document, maybe a constitution or a treaty. So that's another characteristic which we have agreed. In that political association, members could decide to dismiss one of their own. Another one, which is the last one, usually in a confederal association, because members are independent, are sovereign. Decisions normally are based on a consensus. So whenever they make decisions, they have to agree, okay? Because members are sovereign, okay? So if we are going to form that association, we expect when we sit down to write that constitution, one feature or one provision would say consensus or decisions are going to be made by way of consensus.
Thank you, Dr. Eid, for clarifying political confederation and also adding up to characteristics of political confederation. I'll come to you again because we are talking about integration. If I may ask, what are the steps that have been taken for the purpose of integration, especially a political federation?
Okay, thank you. With the steps, now, because the process began a long time ago,
yes,
when the EAC itself was formed, and the aim, as I said, was one to form a political union in the form of a federation. So in 2005 and 2004, a custom union protocol was adopted. That is one stage where now we have free movement of goods. I understand there are still challenges. And also we impose common external tariff, okay? So a customs union is one of the stages. The second stage is a common market. A common market, actually, the protocol was adopted in 2010, and we have started implementing it. One of the key issues in the common market, as you understand, free movement of goods, free movement of persons, free movement of labor, right of establishment, right of residence, free movement of services, all this. Maybe there are still challenges, but we have made progress. And the day before yesterday, Professor Kamanga, who is my teacher, and I arrived in Nairobi, and no one asked us about visas. We are free. From United Republic of Tanzania, we entered Kenya, and actually we missed one flight, so we went to an hotel. No one would ask us about visas or whatever.
Nothing.
So that, for me, is a big progress. That is a revolution in itself. So much as there are challenges, I would say, progress has been made. Another thing which has been done is monetary union. Of course, a protocol was on monetary union was adopted in 2013. I understand we still don't have a common currency as we intended to, but I think the adoption of the protocol on that issue is itself a success.
Thank you very
and
much.
And the last one, if I may add, is now we are consulting people to form a confederation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eid, for your elaborative answers. I want to ask our next panelist, Avocati Abdul Qadir Mohammed Tahlil, a learned friend and a colleague. I want to ask you one brief question. You are going to give me one concise answer. Can you provide, as a corporate lawyer, can you provide an overview of the key commercial laws, intellectual property laws, and what changes do we need, and how are we going to adapt? Yes.
Thank you very much, moderator. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Bashir. I'm very grateful to be here with these honorable members of the panel. and I say hello to everyone in the hall. Thank you for your patience or for waiting up to now and the conclusion of this session. To answer your question, dear moderator, Somalia has joined the East African community recently. It's the latest of the 8 partner states who joined this organization in March 2024. An organization is an organization that exists since 2000. So it's older, it's 24 years old. And since then, the adoption of the treaty, the protocols who are annexed, the customs union, the common market protocol, the monetary union, and the political federation that, as the professors recently said, it's in hold. Then there has been a lot of legislations adopted by the East African Assembly and the Council of Ministers, who is also under the treaty provision, is one of the main legislators of the East African community. So we have the acts of the parliaments, the regulations, the decisions, and the directives adopted by the institutions of the East African community. Somalia signed and ratified the treaty. So we assume that obligation is to implement all the legislations that has been enacted in the meantime. We have to harmonize our legislations in all the matters covered by the East African Community Treaty. In order to harmonize, we have to maybe repeal some legislations, maybe to amend some legislations and repeal, and others that we should maybe indicate how we are going to comply with the provisions of the treaty and the other community laws. We just recently, the last week, the Somali delegation, guided by the special envoy of the president, Dr. Abdulsalam Hadliya, and the delegations from Somali institutions, different ministries, and the agencies, we have signed the integration roadmap to adopt all the legislations needed to give an effect the East African community laws. So, to answer your question, the main commercial laws that we have to modify or amend, there are a lot. But before we do that, the Somalia must adopt a legislation that implement or give the guidelines to implement the different laws that has been enacted in the meantime, like the East African Community Customs Management Act, which is in force since 2004 for the other partner states. That means we have to repeal our current customs law, and this will be the law of the land of Somalia. The elimination of the Non-Tariff Barriers Act, adopted in 2017 and in force for the other member states. The East African One-Stop Border Posts Act, which will repeal our immigration laws in the part that regards the East African citizens.
Yes.
And the movement of Somali citizens towards these countries. The Civil Aviation Safety and Security Oversight Agency Act, which is 2009, and in force for the other countries. The East African Competition Act, which, as you know, Somalia will lack Competition Act, and one of the main principles of the East African community is the
Yes.
economic cooperation,
Competition law, yes,
the
yes.
free market.
Yes.
We have to guarantee competition
Yes.
field.
If I may interrupt you, Abokati Abdul Qadir, thank you very much. Just in a nutshell, you have said we have adapted most of the laws, key commercial laws, investment codes, intellectual property laws in Somalia, and the work of aligning those laws into East Africa community is ongoing, as you have said. We have seen, but others like competition law are not yet been adapted or ratified, or maybe has not been made. But you have seen like investment laws and commercial laws, business, all these codes have been aligned to the East African community. Thank you very much for your answer. I go now to my colleague and my friend, Professor Abdul Qadir Yusuf, on enforcement and institutional capacity. Professor, I'll be brief on this, and I hope you are going to be brief on that as well. I will ask you one question. What are the steps, the first steps that the Parliament of Somalia should take as far as enforcement and institutional capacity is concerned? Please pass on the microphone. Thank you.
Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. This, the question I like to give the youth who are sitting here, please give me your attention. The parliament is going to elect 9, that's the priority number one. The priority number one for the federal parliament is to elect 9 members of East African Assembly. Therefore, you have a lot of chance, you who are sitting here. The intellectuals who are sitting here, I think you are the only one who can qualify applying this. If you look Article 50 of the Treaty of EAC, it says that every partner, every membership will elect 9 members from political parties. We don't have political parties, you know it. Therefore, the federal parliament, the joint sitting of the federal parliament will elect 9 members. We are now working on rules of procedure. Since we don't have even the political party law or electoral law, we don't have it. Now the parliament is going to amend its rules of procedure. Its joint rules of procedure will be amended so that they can elect these 9 members. That's number one, the first step. Within 12 months, the parliament has to elect its members, and also all other organs of the EEC has to be filled. Each time it's required to adopt a law. For example, after that one of the election of the 9 members, also the judges will be also elected or not appointed. And as you know it, we don't have our, what they call Justice Service Commission, we don't have it. That's the one who's going to appoint it. That's also another tricky point. I don't know how it will come out. But that's what the parliament also has to approve it. 2 lawyers has to be also join the judicial court, what you call East African Court of Justice. We also has to apply it. What's now required, the parliament has to have a priority. They have to set up a roadmap. They have to set up a committee to prioritize what are required, what are the legal area that has need to be transformed. Imagine, this is the whole question of this meeting is this: how we can integrate by transforming our legal system. As you all know, we are the only country in I think the member states who are civil law.
Yes, our legal system is mostly based on civil law.
All the rest are common law.
Yes.
Burundi used to be a civil law. They now transform it into common law.
Common law system, yes, because they have to integrate.
But ours is quite more complex than that. We are hybrid system where we have customary law,
Yes.
Sharia law,
Yes.
civil law,
Yes.
constitutional law, and international law, all are there.
And some of the common laws as well.
Therefore, this is what we needed, to change in any laws that are related to these 4 pillars.
Yes.
The parliament has to amend it. And we need a lot of it's not an easy thing to do it.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdulkadir.
Before I finish this
Yes.
one, also
Yes.
look up the priority. We have only two years left for our parliament. 2 years left for our parliament, and we have all this task.
Less than
to
2
complete
years.
it.
Yes.
Can we achieve that one?
Yes.
Exactly, 2 years, all with the recess, with all holidays, with all Hajj and Ramadan, all kind of things. And 12 months, we have to complete all requirements by East African community, whether it is personality, capacity building, we have to fulfill it.
Yes.
Therefore,
you.
this is
Thank
what
you,
we
Professor
have.
Abdulkadir. Professor Abdulkadir is always a hard-hitting man. He doesn't leave behind his comments. I just wanted to ask Professor Abdulkadir one thing. What about the judiciary?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the hardest thing we have here. As I said before, we don't have our constitutional court. We don't have our what they call Justice Service Commission. We don't have it.
Yeah.
And really, to set up that one, this kind of conference, I'm very glad that the organizers, but it was needed to come before the adoption of this treaty. It has to debate on this one, what legal effect it has to our legal system. This is the debate we should have before this conference.
Yes.
Even before that treaty being signed by our government. It has to be discussed thoroughly, see the impact of the treaty to our legal system. Our judiciary needs a long way to establish it. We don't have, as I said, just service commission. The law establishing that commission was approved in 2014, and the board is not there. The constitutional code was adopted. The law of constitution establishing the constitutional code was adopted in 2015, and still we don't have it. Therefore, we need, in order to be part of what they call the East African Court of Justice, we must absolutely establish, complete our legal system.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdulkadir. Professor Dr. Idi, I wanted to ask, what about the secretariat? Is in like, for example, Somali needs to have some committees, and some secretariats for administrative purposes, will there be any chance?
Are you saying Somalia should have committees?
Yes. Into the East African community.
Yes, I would think it is a good idea for maybe Somalia to have a body which will be working on a daily basis for the purpose of integrating Somalia into EAC. And that body would be contacting with the secretariat on a daily basis, what to do, what people are supposed to appoint. And as I said earlier, Somalia is supposed to have its members in the Committee of Constitutional Experts. So that's one of them. But not only that committee, but other institutions of the EAC. So I think it's a good idea to have a committee or commission, whatever name we wish to call it, that would be implementing the process of integrating Somalia into EAC. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you very much. Professor Alexander, final comment? Professor Alexander, yes?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think the only thing I would want to add is you are also discussing about resources here and there.
Yes.
And you have a great resource actually here in the room.
Yes, yes.
And that is the young people who are eager to learn and know and understand
fresh
regional
minds,
integration.
yes.
And that is something that cannot be overestimated, right? Building also a pool of people who know about the East African community, but also who can co-shape the future of this very dynamic organization. And that's something that as I said, you cannot overestimate as a resource. And then you can also deal with some tough tensions, between security issues and the freedoms of the market, the common market, between questions of double memberships. I mean, EGAT featured here and there in our discussions, but what does it mean, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to acknowledge these tensions, and we probably, you would do good to rely on fresh minds and young people, well-trained in regional integration.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor. I would have liked to continue for a long time, but time will not allow me to do so. I would have also wanted to take a comment and a question, but I don't. We have our social media handle. Please, if you have any comment or any question, you can forward your questions through our social media handle. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure and an honor to be part of this. And thank you very much. And also thank you to our panel. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much, Saeed and the panelists. One more round of applause for them, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the final stages of our event. Please take a picture of them, the media team. As they take pictures, I would like to welcome Jueria. She's a researcher based here in Mogadishu.